Hello my coding Padawans and welcome to this video tutorial series where you are going to learn how to build your own URL shortener using Laravel. Now this is part 1 of the tutorial series, and in this part I'm going to give you an introduction to the actual project idea, the concept behind it, as well as how you can get started with Laravel. Now with no further ado, let's get started. So as you can see here, I got a website called Bitly. Bitly is a URL shortener website. Before we start coding anything, we have to understand the concept behind what a URL shortener does and what a URL shortener is. Now, a URL shortener takes a long link, for example, from this BBC article, and once you paste this long link over here and you shorten it, you're going to get a very small link. Now, what we are interested in this tutorial is the implementation of the core functionality behind this URL shortener. Of course, there are many more features they can use and implement. For example, there's statistics, there's accounts, and a lot of many other features that are available on Bitly that you can actually create them yourself, but we're not interested in those features at this time in this tutorial. What we're interested in is the core functionality of taking a link, copying a link from somewhere, putting it into an input box, shortening it, and then copying the link and using it, and it should be redirecting you back to the original link you have shortened. So that's the entire core functionality, and that's our focus for this video tutorial series. Now, next thing up is Laravel. So what is Laravel? Laravel is the PHP framework for web artisans. Well, except for the web artisans part, well, Laravel is a PHP framework. A PHP framework allows you to code in a more expressive, elegant, and short way, and it has a myriad of features that you would normally have to code and implement yourself if you were to do that in vanilla PHP. But you don't have to do that with Laravel. Laravel already gives you all the database connections you need, it has a lot of configuration setups, and it's actually very, very easy to get started with coding your own project using this framework. Now, if you don't have experience in Laravel at this moment, then I would recommend you to watch maybe a couple tutorials online in regards to Laravel. But I'm going to try and make things as simple as possible for people who have not touched Laravel before in this video. And of course, it would be much preferable, or maybe even a prerequisite, if you have some minor PHP knowledge, some basic PHP knowledge before taking on this task, since Laravel is just a framework that builds up on PHP and it's not PHP by itself. Now, in order to install Laravel, in order to use Laravel and make a project with this framework, what you need to do is download Composer. Composer is a dependency manager for PHP. In simple terms, if you've used Node.js before and you used NPM manager, well, NPM is the dependency manager for Node.js libraries, and Composer is the equivalent dependency manager for PHP, which means it can install multiple features that Laravel comes in with by simply entering one command. So, in order to download it, if you're on Windows, you can simply download the Composer setup executable and install it on your computer. Otherwise, what you need to do is actually use these commands right here. Just copy paste them into Linux or Mac terminal. It will install Composer for you in there. Alright, now that we have briefly covered what the project is about and the framework that we're going to use, as well as the dependency manager, it's time to get started and actually create a Laravel project. In order to do that, I'm going to fire up PHP Storm, which is an IDE that I'm going to use. You can use any IDE you want for your project. You can use Visual Studio Code or Atom or anything else. I am very familiar with this IDE, so this is why I'm going to use it. And it's free for students, so if you are a student and you're watching this tutorial right now, then you can download PHP Storm using your student email address and you should be fine. So let's create a project. I'm going to create an empty PHP project, even though I have the option to install a Composer project. That's because some people may not have this option available on their IDE. So this is why I'm going to just create an empty project and use the command line to create a Laravel instance. Let's create the project. So I've created a standard PHP project, and what I'm going to do now is open up terminal. Now, if we go back to the documentation right over here, it shows you how you can install Laravel. So to install Laravel, you have quite a few options. You can use the Laravel installer, or what we're going to do in this case is use Composer create project command and create the project using this. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. And I'm just going to change the blog to the name of the project. So it's going to be URL Shortener. If I click enter, it should be installing the Laravel project. So we're going to be using Laravel 6.8 from the looks of it, because we use the prefer dist flag right over here. So this means that it's going to fetch the recommended version that is used for Laravel. Right, so as you can see, Laravel has been successfully installed, and let's take a look at how the project structure looks like before moving in to the next part, where we're going to actually write the code for database schema for this application. So as you can see here, we got quite a few folders, quite a few files. Now I'm going to go through the most important bits and pieces that we need to understand about the project structure. First of all, it's the app. In the app, we have the HTTP folder and we have controllers. Now this framework is obviously an MVC framework. It's model view controller, which means you have a database model which communicates with the controller, which is where your code that has to do with fetching information from the database and sending it into the person that requests it is responsible for. And finally, we have the letter V, which stands for view, and it has to do with what the person who requests the resource is going to see on their computer. Right here, currently we have one controller, and we have a few more controllers within the auth folder. Now, we're not going to use any of these controllers at the moment because we don't need them. We're going to create a new controller in the tutorial series, and I'm going to show you how a controller is going to work. Now, this is what we need to know about the controller bit. So the controller part of the MVC is stored in app, HTTP, controllers. Now, next up, Bootstrap. Bootstrap is some basic Bootstrap code that enables the application, the Laravel application, to work. We're not interested in that, and we're going to skip through to the configuration. In the configuration, you have quite a few configuration items like here. For example, we've got application configuration, and these values right here are fetched. Well, actually, those are the default values, but they are changed in the config file that's called .env. So .env is the environment configuration file. The environment configuration file holds the information you need in regards to the application. So you can change the connection to your database. It can be MySQL, it could be SQLite, or it can be any other database you want. In this case, we're going to use MySQL. Now, we're going to change this configuration here in the next part, where we're going to set up the database connection and the database schema. And right now we're going to carry on through the next folders, and the next folder is public. Now, public is the root folder where the person who actually requests a resource is going to request through index first. Now, next up is resources. In resources, you pretty much store the JavaScript files, the language files. So the language files can look like that. So you can have translations of multiple words that have to do with multiple pages. And you got Sass. Sass is pretty much a smart CSS language. You can check it out over here. If you go to sasslang, I think should be, yeah, sasslang.com. So go to sasslang.com, you can find out what Sass is about, and it's a very powerful tool for CSS, and it helps you write very nice code with CSS if you use that. Now, we're not going to be writing a lot of CSS now code, which is fine, because our entire point of this project is to be able to code the functionality behind it. However you want to style it next is entirely up to you. But I'm just letting you know that if you want to style the application, the place to do so is here in the Sass folder. And views are pretty much what we talked about. That's the V in the MVC part. That's the views. This is what the user is going to see once they visit the website. And I'm going to prove it to you by writing the command PHP artisan serve. So if you write this, you get an error. Right, I've noticed that we are one directory up, so we are not in the URL shortener right here because there's a folder inside a folder with the same name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do inside the URL shortener, write PHP artisan serve, and now we have a live server running at this address. So if we click that, it's going to pop up, and here we go. We see Laravel, docs, Laracast, and news. So if we compare this to here, as you can see, we get the exact same thing. So we got Laravel in the title. We also have the CSS within the Blade PHP folder, within the Blade PHP file, And over here, as you can see, we got the links. We got the title, Laravel, we got the links right here. So this is what we actually see. So if we change that to URL shortener, like that, and refresh, we see URL shortener yet again. Now, just to finish with the project structure, we're going to go to the roots. Inside here, we see web. So there's API, channels, console, and web. Well, we're interested in the web routes. So we go here, and you can see what a web route is. A web route is pretty much the link. It's the path, it's the destination you have on a link in your application. So if we put the / here, we also have this function that returns the view that is called welcome. Now this is familiar. Welcome is the name of the welcome.blade.php file, which is within the resources views welcome.blade.php file. Now if we were to create a new file, such as test.blade.php, and we wrote here, for example, a heading called test page, and then we went back to the roots over here and we copy this, paste, and create a new destination called test, and we would return the test view that we have named here .test.blade.php. Then we get this file to be served on our website. So let's check it out. Let's go to our website, put /test, and we go test, we get served the test page. So this is how we're going to create a new view for our page and a new route that is linked with that page. I'm going to expand more on that once we approach towards the end of the tutorial series, where we're going to be coding the actual functionality, and this is what we're going to be doing. So we're going to revisit this at a later stage, so don't worry if you don't understand how this exactly works at the moment. Finally, we got storage. Storage is a series of configurations on how you would like to store files. This is not something we are going to care about, since we're going to store all the information on our database. Here, test, the test folder has PHP unit tests, which we're not going to implement any unit tests here, so we can disregard this. And vendor are just the composer dependencies that have been installed in order for Laravel to actually work. Finally, one more thing that is quite important is the PHP artisan command. The PHP artisan command, type PHP artisan, it's going to give you a range of commands you can use with their respective flags, and as well as what they do. We're going to cover how to use this command with databases, how to create what is called migrations, and how to create models, and also how to create controllers. So that is all for part 1. We have understood what we need to do for the project, how the concept of a URL shortener works. We have also covered how you can install Laravel and how you can install its dependencies, as well as set up a basic route and a basic view. Now in the next part, what we're going to do is actually implement a database schema where we're going to store our information required inside the database. I'll see you in the next video.